George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue is perhaps one of the greatest orchestral works of the 20th century, maybe even one of the greatest of all time. But the guy didn't really want to write it, and it almost didn't happen. Right up until there, I mean, what a melody. And the second we arrive at the end of it, we're given this. There are multiple different themes in that opening, all of which became absolutely iconic. But in 1924, when this was supposed to take place, Gershwin didn't even want to write it. In fact, the only reason that he was eventually talked into it is because they had announced his involvement without him even knowing. An Experiment in Modern Music was a concert put on at Aeolian Hall in New York City in February of 1924. It was put on by Paul Whiteman, then dubbed the King of Jazz, but he was putting on this concert where he wanted to display American artists and put forth jazz to the world as something that could rival European classical music. And not so much rival, but more like create a synergy with it. He wanted to blend these styles and try to provide jazz with a more legitimate view in the world, because at the time it wasn't necessarily taken as seriously as perhaps European classical music. And so, knowing that George Gershwin had previously declined offers to work with Paul Whiteman in this manner, he just announced the concert anyways. Just announced Gershwin's involvement. In fact, Gershwin's brother Ira had to come to him with a paper and say, hey, do you know about this? But it was a phone call later and lots of, I'm sure, profuse apologizing and heavy convincing that Gershwin was finally convinced to work on the piece. But here's the kicker. The dude only had 5 weeks to write this. Leonard Bernstein conducting and performing on the piano at the same time. What a great section. Yes! Woo! Oh man, okay, so imagine it's 1924, you show up to Aeolian Hall in New York City, and you're like, oh, this is, I don't know, some concert that Paul Whiteman's putting on. I don't really know what this is about, but it seems cool, and this hits you directly in the face. I mean, come on. So how do you write a 17-minute composition for full orchestra in 5 weeks? Well, number one, be George Gershwin. That part helps a lot. But actually, the tight deadline worked as a sort of inspiration for Gershwin. And so Gershwin's on a train headed to Boston, and just listening to all of the sounds around in his environment and all of the bangs and the clacks and other onomatopoeia words that I just apparently made up in my head. Clack. These sounds served as sort of an inspiration and kind of just had his mind going. Of course, this is back when all you could do on a train was read a newspaper or stare at the person in front of you. I can't even get on a flight without noise-canceling headphones. But by the time he reached Boston, he said that he had discovered the plot to the entire Rhapsody from beginning to end. He heard the entire construction of this piece in his head because of train noises. So like something like that. A line like that, now you have to remember, we're talking 1924. Now jazz in 1924 didn't quite sound like jazz in the mid-60s. The post-bop, modern, modal eras that we hear when we think of Coltrane, Miles' Second Quintet, that kind of stuff, that stuff didn't exist yet. Jazz in the 20s had a different sound. I mean, we had the dominant sounds of Louis Armstrong and Bix Beiderbecke, King Oliver and Fletcher Henderson. These sounds we might consider today to be a little bit well, I mean, it's the sort of roaring 20s sound. I don't want to say corny because it doesn't, I don't think that's accurate at all, but when we compare the jazz from the 60s to the jazz of the 20s, it's very different. And so some of the language that we'll hear in Rhapsody in Blue might be a little more reminiscent of that 20s jazz era because, well, that's the music at the time. Oh, what a theme, come on. Wow. It wasn't just how these genres of music were viewed on a world stage that was a driving force for Paul Whiteman to put on this concert. It was literally a desire to draw two completely different approaches to music together and prove that they could work as one thing. Wow. I think this is one of the most beautiful melodies ever written, and this internal voice movement, this counter melody that's written within it is really fascinating and super cool, and it uses what you might call like a permutation, a rhythmic permutation, to get the sound that it does. In music, a rhythmic permutation is when we take something that is a certain number of units, like beats or notes, and we put it inside of something that is not that number of units. In Rhapsody in Blue, we have this inner voice movement that sounds like this. Now this is a super cool line, and we can hear it shifting each time it kind of goes around, and here's why that's happening. We have a rhythm here that consists of 5 notes, 1E and 2 and. However, we only have 3 notes to play that rhythm with, and we simply play those 3 notes downward and then go back to the top, and that sounds like this. So when we combine the 3 notes that we have available to play with the 5 notes that we need in order to complete the rhythm, naturally what starts to happen is those 3 notes start to become offset within that 5-beat rhythmic figure. And thus, we get this sound. We can see our 3 notes happening over and over again, and we can see our 5-beat rhythmic figure happening over and over again, and because they don't match, that's how we get this beautiful sounding permutation. New chord. Oh, yes. Same thing. Oh. There it is. One of my favorite chords of all time, the minor 4 chord. We have A minor, which is the 4 chord of E, and when you make it, so that's just the 4 chord, but then when you make it minor, oof, it's just so emotional. That chord is unbelievable. There's our callback to that little chromatic melody. And then to get us out, this thing. It's like you have to use both hands. Left, right, chord with the right. Because with the right hand here, you can go note, chord. But then you come right back in with the left hand. So it goes left, right, right, left, right, right, left, right. Yeah. And you just basically learn how to do that, and then it gets faster. So like, you know, and you get this thing that sounds like it's like one complete idea. Okay, let me see if I can do this. Oh man, I haven't done this in so long. Here we go. Ugh. Yikes. Yeah. And then we start to break it up. That was horribly messy, by the way. But then we start to break it up. Watch this. Dig that! That is one of the coolest things, I think, in almost any piece ever. Let's play it again. How nuts is that? And then we piece it all together at speed. It sounds like this. Not like that. Let's try it again. That's so difficult. Let's let Leonard Bernstein play it a lot more accurately. It's hard, it's hard. He's not doing it like perfectly. Oh yeah, that part, I forgot about this part. You know what I love about this? This isn't perfect. This is like far from perfect, but who cares? Because he's conducting the literal orchestra at the same time. This isn't a video about Leonard Bernstein, but let's be real, he's a beast. Finally, back to our melody, back to our theme. And this theme that perfectly encapsulates the combination of jazz influences with classical music. I mean, it literally is in between. Wow! Dude on cymbals living his best life. Chills. I have chills. It's the chill test. I've got him. Woo! The hair on the back of my neck just stood up. Wow. I mean, 1924, right? Almost didn't even happen. Gershwin didn't even want to do it, and he had to be convinced to do it. So he's like, all right, I got 5 weeks. I don't know. Here's this. And what it wound up being is one of the most iconic pieces ever. Certainly one of the defining moments of Gershwin's legacy. And it's a shame that we lost him at 38 years old. I mean, absolute tragedy. But thankfully, we have this, and we have his entire massive library of other work that we can go back to, and this gift that he left for the world. I mean, it's hard to put it into words, but I'm just always blown away by the fact that it almost just didn't even happen, and it happened in such a short amount of time, just on deadline for a show that was gonna happen. It's like me rolling into a recording session with tunes I wrote the night before, which I have done, but I didn't write Rhapsody in Blue. But I'm curious if this is one of your favorite Gershwin works as well, or if you tend to prefer some of his other stuff, like, I don't know, An American in Paris. There's another amazing work that he did. Guys, and by the way, it is November, which means Black Friday's coming up, and we're doing something massive. If you want to know more about it, there's a link in the description down below. And if you sign up to get info about the sale, you're also going to get a bunch of cool stuff between now and Black Friday, including free lessons and sneak peeks at course material. So if you're curious and you want to check that out, there's a link in the description down below. It's gonna be huge. We'll talk more about it very soon, but that link is down there if you want a little more information now. But for now, that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.